next speaker of the morning, or rather, like to first, okay, given the, this is not a good time to rearrange seatings, okay. We'll slowly have delegates climbing up the wall and the roof of the conference room, I guess, but I need to make some more space. Are there any vacant chairs? As I announced earlier, if you could squeeze in and make sure. Okay, no, we just have about all seated. Thank you so much. But if there are any one chairs in front, let me know. So the next topic is about State of Quality 2016 Investigation Report, the evolution of testing into quality engineering and assurance. For this, we have Sridhar, Head of IME Testing Services and Marketing Analyst, Advisor and Alliance Relations at Wipro. To briefly introduce, Sridhar is again a regular face at STC. Glad to have you again. Sridhar is an IIM Calcutta alumnus and a computer science engineer with over 18 years in IT consulting, business leadership across globe. He currently heads Wipro IME Testing Services, Business and Marketing, Analyst, Advisor, and Alliance Relations. Prior to IT Services, he was part of a startup and e-governance initiative. His experience spans business strategizing, nurturing global accounts, and mentoring geographically spread teams. Sridhar is deeply spiritual and passionate about homeopathy, anthropology, and other holistic disciplines. We'd like to hear a little bit about that too, Sridhar. All yours. Thank you so much. Check mic.
Good morning. So it was fantastic listening to Indranil. It was almost feeling like it kind of elevated the mood and feel for testing. Right? It almost felt like we're at a much, it's like a scientific fiction thing that we do, rather than some boring job, end of life cycle activity. So that's indeed true. I think some of the research findings I'm going to share will also be kind of proving that. So what I'm going to present is a state of quality report, which we have recently published at Wipro. And before I go into the details, some of the nuances or insights from the report, I wanted to share why the report in the first place as well. Right? There are quite a few reports out there in the market. What we noticed is 100% of them, invariably all of them, are based on surveys. They poll about 1400 to 1600 CXOs. They ask them questions. Those are kind of collated back to us as the research findings, right? In my mind, most of the times there were anomalies in the reports, both synchronically and diachronically. When I say that, both within the same report as well as across different versions of the report, because it's an intent. So when asked a question, typically the CXO would respond by saying, yeah, about 20%, or he will give out a view at that point in time. It may not have a correlation to the reality, the ground reality in that particular organization. So we thought there is a bit of a thinking-doing gap here. This is further corroborated by the fact that when we are responding to so many RFIs and RFPs, when we connect with our customers, what we discuss in the sales cycle versus what we do in the delivery cycle, there seems to be a huge amount of thinking-doing gap. There is a strategic intent, there is an executive thought process, and what happens at the ground level, there is a huge gap. So we essentially wanted to kind of study this thinking-doing gap, if you will, right? That was one of the primary things. And then the second reason is, of course, as an industry, we needed to demonstrate our thought leadership. If you look at some of the holistic sciences, or there are certain disciplines that are often challenged are ragged for what's the value that you are bringing in, what's it that you bring to the table. Testing is one such. There is like a debate about whether testing should completely be removed. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we have also seen a lot of keynotes on this, whether test is dead or is it dead in the current form, what's the new form, what's the future of testing. So there's a lot of debate going on in the industry about this, right? So to demonstrate the thought leadership of the industry, we needed a report that will kind of bring the intrinsic value that testing brings to the table. That was another thought process. And thirdly, we thought instead of looking at all the CXOs, polling them, asking them different questions, if you look at the data that's available out there, patterns should emerge on their own, right? And that should actually conclude into certain observations, certain deductions that we can make about the state of quality. And we thought that will be a much more reflective of what's happening on the ground than the a CXO enunciating a vision of, no, we want to do 100% automation, in sprint automation, those kind of statements. So those are the three drivers essentially, because we considered before we published. A lot of thought process went in. We were not sure if we needed one more report because there are quite a few out there. But essentially these are the three drivers that kind of led us to come out with a report, right? So for all of you, if you have read the abstract on the QAI site, where I've given a brief abstract out about the paper as well as a download link. If not, all that you need to do is say Wipro State of Quality 2016 on the Google search, you will get the report. It's a 28-page small report, a very humble beginning, I would say. We looked at, I'll come to what we looked at to come out, but that's the index essentially. Whatever patterns that emerged as part of what I spoke here kind of neatly sat in some pillars out there like automation, performance engineering, end customer experience, test data and environment management, quality engineering. So these are the kind of pillars into which most of our observations went. I also need to speak a little more, I'll come there, but one key observation we made here is it looks like truly testing has transformed itself and has moved away from the end of life cycle activity to something like an engineering discipline, a quality engineering and assurance discipline. That's what has happened. So we kind of likened that in the report to the transformation from a caterpillar to that of a butterfly. That was the analogy that we used, right? Okay. So now to come out with these patterns, what did we do actually? Some bragging rights for Wipro here. So Mahesh can always counter me, he's right here, right? So in the industry, Wipro is the first tier 1 vendor who went and dedicated investments in testing. So we kind of started way back in 96, 97 as an interops group. And since then, a lot of flowing back of the revenues has happened in form of innovation, research, IP creation, or giving it back to the industry or to the discipline. And we are also sitting on huge amount of data out there. For example, we kind of looked at about 1,500 QA engagements that we are doing for about 400 plus customers out there. Over the last year and a half, we were responding to so many RFPs. So we looked at RFI, RFP database that we have. About 1,000 RFI, RFPs were looked at. We culled out what is asked from customer. And wherever we have engagements, what is actually happening in the engagement right now. We looked at social media feedback. We also looked at various test advisory services, consulting engagements that we did over the last year or so, to look at what's happening in the industry and what is the intent of this strategic layer, the executives, how is that gap that is existing. Because the whole idea behind the report we wanted to produce was to kind of give a reality check in the industry, right? And then we also had a lot of interactions with experts, customers, analysts, and we looked at all the industry domains that we operate in, and that's all kind of led into recognizing these patterns across various domains. So in the report, we have also kind of collated these patterns as wherever possible specific to certain industry domains, and wherever there are generalizations across the industry, we have given them as such. So that's what has gone into making the report, right? So as part of this, what we have realized is what we called as a pit stop paradigm. If you look at Formula One racing, in earlier days, maybe 50s and 60s, when the pit stop, when a Formula One racer comes and stops at the pit stop, it takes over a minute, over 60 seconds for him to get things checked up, change the tires and check the air pressure, whatever it is. And very often it was seen as if that is kind of taking away way too much time. And that kind of is delaying the whole thing. So people were not happy with it. Sounds similar, right? Testing as an activity, as an end of life cycle activity. You do that and you're wasting valuable resources, you're delaying things, it adds no value. Developers are getting better, so we don't need testing. So that's the kind of thought process, right? But today, if you look at the same pit stop, it hardly takes a couple of seconds, and that kind of differentiates the edge. It's like kind of the edge for the winners. And something very similar has happened in testing. The quality assurance and engineering discipline that we are headed into is like anyway cutting down on the time that is required. At the same time, things are getting shifted left. There is an engineering aspect to the whole thing. And it is kind of the make or break for the business. There is more and more that glass ceiling of you have to go through, you are a derived discipline is gone away now. Today, the quality engineering discipline is able to directly interact with business, especially when you look at some of the non-functional engineering aspects, performance engineering, performance testing. So it is very inextricably interwoven with the business. The success of an initiative, it could be in the form of a mobile app or otherwise. So this is what we have kind of concluded in the report. So the report is out there, you can download and read through the contents. What I'm trying to do is I'm kind of highlighting some of the observations that we had in the report and highlight some of the nuances, if any, right? So the report concludes that we called it the S cube for the science of testing. There are three things that are defining the industry today for testing: speed, structure, and skills. So speed, obviously, because of the digital impact, the onslaught of digital transformation that's going on, the adoption of agile, DevOps. There is always, business wants to do things faster. I think Indranil gave some fantastic statistics about what an online retailer has to do. And to enable all that, speed is required. And testing cannot be left behind. So initially the speed is kind of achieved by kind of bringing the right kind of solutions, right kind of accelerators in the life cycle. But that has changed. What today we are experiencing is a shift from mere solutions to platforms, integrated delivery platforms. So hitherto, we only had IDEs for development work. Now, most of the tier 1 vendors are building IDEs for quality and testing. So at Wipro, we have Assure Next and IntelliAssure, two of our integrated delivery platforms. One for the mode 1 traditional testing, the end-to-end test lifecycle automation. IntelliAssure looks at the cognitive aspects of bringing cognitive intelligence into testing. Right? These are the two delivery platforms that we have. So what is happening, the shift that we are seeing is that from solutions to platforms. And going forward, we also concluded that the shift will be from platforms to ecosystems. As things move to the cloud or as things move further, it will just not be our own platforms, but necessarily it will be an ecosystem in which these applications have to deliver things. It could be a cloud ecosystem out there, it could be our own platforms, and then interacting with some of the other things that are required, right? So this is how things are shaping up. That's the speed aspect of it. From a structure point of view, Over a period of time, what we saw is like there is a shift from decentralized to centralized when there is a need is felt for value creation. And when there is a need felt for efficiency and nimbleness, there is a decentralization. And there is no one size fits all solution here. Organizations have toggled between these two states as and when required. When one is achieved, the other need is felt, and there is a direction in the other direction, the movement is in the other direction. So there are large organizations that we worked with who have initially centralized and eventually brought it back to decentralized model and then gone back to a federated model. So some kind of a central control, governance, and then a decentralized approach to testing is what I think is happening today. And that also goes hand in hand with other developments such as agile, DevOps, and having smaller teams that are doing sprints and those kind of things, right? So that's about the structure. Now that kind of leads us into skills that I can take an example for one of our leading manufacturer from the US. We actually had to train our quality engineers on programming. And I think that's not an isolated case. That's happening in pockets in other accounts also. So what we are observing is the growth of something like an SDET, Software Development Engineering Test, or when Pradeep initially opened the session, he spoke about Agile having no specialization. There are only 3 roles there. There is a team member. Is he a developer? Is he a tester? Or rolled into one? So that is the kind of a situation that exists today in the industry. So the skills that are required are changing, and that's the other pillar that is defining the science of testing. So this in a nutshell is what the entire report is all about. And if you look at what's happening out there in terms of speed, we are achieving that by increasing adoption of automation in the industry. We noticed about 85% increase in adoption of automation over the last 2 years. And Agile DevOps kind of generated revenues have gone up for Wipro to about 21%. The next generation testing such as API testing is kind of crossing about 20% mark now, right? So that basically means that will kind of gather more and more momentum. There's a tipping point that we are achieving here. In terms of structure and commercial models, as I told you, structure, there is a toggle between central and decentralized models. But at the same time, if you look at the innovation in the commercial models, while there is a definite adoption of more innovative commercial models like unit pricing models, right? Whereas there is a toggle in the other models like T&M, FPP, fixed capacity, there is an increase and decrease. But a definite increase, again there is a tipping point that we are seeing for more innovative commercial models in the form of unit-based pricing models. So from the skill point of view, the third pillar that we spoke about, so there are about 66% of agile engagement that don't have a dedicated testing as a role. It's a team member there, right? And there is an increasing demand for open source tool usage, especially when it comes to speed and automation. Though it's not the case in performance, interestingly. The adoption of or increasing, right now if you look at automation, about 56% of tool usage in automation is from open source. And that kind of gets correlated with the other impacts of Agile and DevOps, because the open source tools are able to adapt themselves faster to the digital onslaught that's happening, the other trends that are happening. Whereas the vendors are not able to cope up with the pace at which the industry is changing, the drivers that are driving the industry. So that is probably the reason. And so for 66% of Agile engagements use open source tools, right? So from here, I move into each of those pillars that I was showing you earlier. But in essence, this is the import of the overall report. And as I said, this is one of our initial and humble attempts to come out with a report. We did with very minimal resources this time around. But going forward, what is happening is some of this pattern matching and analysis is actually done using our cognitive platform, which I told you is IntelliAssure. So there is more and more coming out. It's actually, we needed to kind of look at it and comprehend and put it in a context to you. So that I think the report next year when we come out with one, will be able to kind of present more, and it may be much more insightful when it comes to finding those trends or patterns which are not quite apparent to the naked eye. So that's the first part of my presentation. From here I will kind of cover some of the observations in each of those pillars. Okay, so if you look at the automation, as I was saying, there is an 85% increase in the overall footprint over the last 2 years. So what is interesting here to note is that unlike in performance, where still the traditional tools still are the leading ones, in automation the adoption of open source tools is very, very high. The other interesting thing that I wanted to highlight here is, while progressive automation seems to be a no-brainer, the adoption is not very great in the industry. And wherever they could have done it, still we had to build a case to do it. With all the shift left happening, and with agile and all this coming up, the trend is definitely increasing, but it is still not at very high levels that it should be. If you look at performance engineering, conventional tools still are the dominant tools out here, probably because of the reliability and ruggedness of the tools and lack of availability of open source tools that are as rugged and reliable in the space. But however, things like Apache JMeter are gaining ground. In fact, one of my buddies has written a book recently, Apache JMeter by example. So I kind of helped them with the book as well. And when I went through it, it seems to have matured over a period of time, and it is kind of going to gain greater ground, I felt. So probably that is a shape of things to come, but at this point in time, majority is still conventional, traditional tools, not open source. And web services, web performance is still the most dominant area where performance testing is done. And despite the case built for performance engineering, that is like kind of trying to bring in performance aspects right from the requirements phase, the adoption is not great. Only about 23% of our customers actually have application performance monitoring tools, APM tools, or performance engineering approach to start with. So, however, the inclination is about 27% of them want to adopt performance engineering practices. So that's the field that we get in performance engineering. There is much more content obviously in the report. You can download and go through. What will be much more interesting for me will be if you kind of give your feedback after reading through the report. That will help us actually kind of shape the next report the way the industry would want it actually. And another pillar is of course the end user experience. So here I found something very, very interesting other than the percentages mentioned here. We looked at retail and banking applications on the available on the iStore, both in North America as well as Europe. So actually, let me ask you, what should be the typical concerns of any of these users? Will that be more on the content, price, performance, or what should be the concern be around? Security? Actually, interestingly, that is not the case. The dominant concerns are mostly around, if you look at the analysis from the report, they are mostly around stability, interoperability, and usability. Your content, performance, and pricing are actually the least of those concerns for users. So the case that I am building here essentially is the end user customer experience is becoming much more important, and some of the concerns that as technical people we think here are probably not the concerns that the end user has, like security for instance, right? And we are looking at banking applications on iStore. Yep. Right, but what we are looking at is the user feedback on the iStore, and none of the comments are pertaining to a security concern. The comments are mostly around scalability, interoperability, usability. And in terms of the satisfaction levels, about 60% of the customers are not happy. So that is a rating of 2 or below. There is about 8% who are neutral, and about 33% are happy with the rating 4 or above for the. And we are looking at banking applications in North America and Europe. And there is a lot more in the report, like how banking is a problem child in the Europe and things like that. A very interesting stuff if you want to download and read the report, right? So test environment management continues to be one of the problem areas for testing. We still waste a lot of time for want of configured environments, for want of right data, right, or having proper strategy in place. That continues to be the issue in the industry. And of course, when it comes to performance, non-functional engineering aspects, somehow people want to hope that production environment will be much better. And in test environment, they somehow see and like do things and say, okay, even if it is slow here, that's because it's like test environment. Right? It will perform much better when it moves into production. So there is kind of a leap of faith that people take. So there is a whole lot of things that we can do in this area as well, right? So quality engineering. So here, this is I think what Indralil already kind of drove home the point very well. So testing as we see today, as we know today, is anyway in its last leg. So what we are moving into is more of a quality engineering and assurance space. So where there may not be a separate dedicated phase for doing testing, but the engineering aspects are right there throughout, where you test the requirements for engineering, for the design aspects as well, right through. And we are ensuring that performance is kind of built in as we are developing stuff. So this is like the trend that we are observing, right? So with that I conclude my talk. When it comes to quality engineering, again, I go back to the original statement I made, which is the shift is happening from solutions to platforms and platforms to ecosystems. That's the kind of shift we are observing. Open for questions. How many of you have downloaded the report actually? Okay, I see only very few. I strongly encourage all of you to download the report, go through. It has some really very interesting stuff out there. As I said, it's like kind of culls out from decades of data and experience that the Wipro team has. And it makes a very interesting read. And as I said, it's like our first attempt. And if anything, I can only tell you there is like gaining traction both within and outside. Most of our customer interactions these days are on the report, and the kind of engagement we see when we kind of present or take any of these individual topics and discuss is tremendous. So I think truly this report has the ability to become demonstrate testing thought leadership for the world, right? It's like something that the industry will look up to year after year. And unlike other reports, as I said, this is based on grounds up data. It's a factual report, it's an investigations report, and not something like an opinion from somebody. Someone has a question out there.
Yeah. Okay, please tell your name, company, and then a short, brief question quickly.
Nikhil from Nikhil from NTT. See, Wipro has been in the forefront of all process as well. You know, one of the first world companies to be CMMI, TMMI, and all that. But I didn't see any flavor of process in your report. You know, was that deliberate, or you think that process, just like people, you talked about skill sets. Do you think that process is something that also plays a part, in getting in the future for testing?
Didn't catch your name though.
Nikhil.
Nikhil. Oh, a very good question, Nikhil. So true that we deviated from the usual people, process, technology kind of perspective, right? But the report does speak about processes as well. What is happening in the industry today is like there's a relook that's being taken at the processes. And it is still not fully stabilized, I feel. This is personal opinion, Nikhil. That what's happening is the traditional processes that we have set so far are being challenged. And the newer processes that are out there still have not kind of taken shape into, not kind of crystallized as they should. If you take some of the areas like mobile or digital assurance, omni-channel assurance, I think there are not many processes that are industry best practices yet. I think there is still time for us to arrive at those. So we did not find that to be a very insightful thing that we could highlight as part of the index itself, but the report does cover some of the process aspects as well.
Hi, I'm Uma from ANZ. So like you said that testing, it's kind of the last line of defense, and the space is transforming significantly. In your report, do you cover any new way to measure the effectiveness of this significant function? Any new metrics that's been coined, or any new ways to measure the effectiveness of this function?
Okay, benefit realization.
Yep.
Made by Indranil. He concluded that you are the last defense, right? Anyway, so in terms of the benefit, I spoke to you about the integration with the business. So if you look at the benefit realization today, these are purely business related benefits. Some very good examples given by Indranil as well. So imagine if your payment gateway has to kind of handle about 120,000 payment processed per second, and that's the kind of performance that you want, and that is what you need to engineer. That's the value that we are bringing in today. So what is happening is there is a hierarchy of what we measure and what are the benefits. At different levels of the organization, different people want different things. There is a strategic expectation of what the business is. There is a managerial view of what the business, what the benefit should be, and then there is an operational view. For an operational guy, your time, schedule, cost, these are still the parameters. But as you move up in that hierarchy, the expectations are becoming more and more different. At the highest level, they're expecting return on investment. Is it able to bring about the business objectives or not? So those are the things that are getting measured now. I think as I was speaking about alluding to some innovative commercial models, in future, I think we will end up seeing payments that are linked to realization of business for testing as well. So it's like going to be that the program succeeds, you get something. It may be a two-part kind of a payment. For doing the thing, you may get paid, but eventually if the program is not a success, you may not get paid more. It will be like an incentivized systems that may come out. So right now we are at the stage of, we are experiencing a lot of unit pricing models, but going forward I think there will be more and more integration with business. Especially talk about these VC funded smaller organizations that also need quality engineered. So they will not go in for any T&M or a fixed price kind of models at all. So they will be based on the success of that particular entity or not.
Right, okay, that's as much time. Thank you, Sridhar. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for the State of Quality 2016 investigation.